Today on the podcast, I'm joined by Dominic Monkhouse, a fantastic coach and executive out of the United Kingdom. And we're talking about his journey through Rackspace, one of the great stories of core values and building a customer-centric culture, and then on to Pier 1, and then his journey as a coach over the last 10 to 15 years and how that's shaped how he turns up today. We talk about leadership and why leadership matters so much and the building from leadership of an A team and really why A teams are essential to the work that you want to get done. Finally, we talk about coaching and coaching frameworks and how coaching has evolved and changed over the years.
Lovely to be on. Thank you for having me. I am Dominic Monkhouse. I'm a business coach based in the New Forest in England. I coach founder CEOs on a journey up and through about 100 people because the complexity comes from people and not from revenue. I do this because I've done this twice before myself. I scaled Rackspace and Pier 1 to over £30 million in the UK. We went on to have a cracking exit at Pier 1. So 10 years ago or so, I started coaching and I've coached more than 100 founder CEOs on their scale-up journeys.
Yeah, but what about the farm?
Well, yeah,
This is what matters to me the most.
We've got a small farm here, and one of the things I wanted to try and do is I was at an event in the US a few years ago, and I did a one-page personal plan. And when I reflected on that exercise, I realized that I'd been married before and I had two older children, married again with two young children. And what would I do differently if I went back in time? And I would engineer more time with the children. So we decided to build a facility on the farm and clients come to us, which means that even when we have client days on the farm, which we do about 100 times a year, I can take the kids to school every day. And so when somebody rings me up and says, Dom, are you in London? It's like, do I want to spend time with you more than take the children to school? So like the bar's gone up significantly and I measure my success on how many days do I take the kids to school. At the moment, we don't have any animals. In the past, we've had rare breed pigs, British lop because their ears fall over their faces. And belted Galloway, which are sort of black with a white hoop around the middle. But last year, and you won't believe this, but it didn't rain in the UK from April till September. Certainly any Americans watching this will just think this ridiculous, but it didn't rain. And so in September, we sold the cows, the pedigree herd that we had, because it was just costing me £25 a day to feed them. And I was never going to get that money back. So at the minute, we have no pigs and no cows, which is the first time in 10 years we don't have any livestock on the farm. They have been funny. We've had chickens in with us with clients. We've had bulls opening the gate and running down the drive, and we've had clients getting them back in the field. People quite like feeding the pigs when they're here.
The closest thing I can imagine is Clarkson's Farm, Jeremy Clarkson, very, very popular show. And I looked it up before you came on, and I think you're like an hour's drive from the Cotswolds where we're here.
Yeah, they're about an hour north. Yeah, you're right.
Let's jump in. What separates a competent coach from a great coach? I feel I have a license to knowing, I have great respect for you, Dom, and knowing that I feel I have mandate or license to jump around as I can.
No problem at all. Look, do you know what? Let me give you, if I can, just tell you a quick story. So in my 30s, I was living down in Lymington, which is on the south coast, and a group of us found ourselves in the pub watching the Six Nations. And somebody said, there are enough people in this pub to start a rugby team. And the town didn't have a club at the time. So we started a rugby club. And we said, it's going to be a vets team. Everyone here is over 35. We're going to play 5 home games and an away tournament in the south of France. The council gave us a pitch. We got some posts up. We had a first home. 350 people came to watch our first home game. Several months later, we're training on a Tuesday night in February in the rain. And some bloke walks up and says, do you need my help? I've been watching you from my bedroom window. I think you need my help. And it's like, that's a bit weird. Who would say that to you? Anyway, turns out Peter had coached the England under-21s and 5 of the current England squad had come through his academy. And so there I am at the back end of my playing career, getting the best coaching of my life. And it was just, international rugby is now a completely different sport to me because I know what drills they do when they're not on the field. And so that was fascinating. So we got promoted 3 seasons on the trot. We had no right to be promoted, but because we didn't have better players than the other people. So this is the thing, which is that he would look at the team and he'd go, I can see the strengths in this team. And on Saturday, we got, some players are missing or injuries, what have you. Okay, so we're going to change it up. But everybody always knew what the game plan was, right? So the ball came to the back of the scrum, any of the set plays, and everybody on the field knew where that ball was going to go. And so that sort of clarity meant that everybody always knew what was going on. We trusted each other. We worked hard for each other. I think we ended up with a great esprit de corps, and we drilled some simple things that we got right. So most of the teams we played had no game plan. They never practiced the set pieces. And so because that became our strength, we just won games we didn't really deserve to win. And, we'd win games in the second half because we were fitter. And so it was just great. That coach looks in on the outside and says, right, we need to, where are we going? Get everybody lined up, play to our strengths, work out what the opponent's weaknesses are. And then you're winning. Honestly, winning is so much better than losing. I hate losing.
Do you think that Peter was
I think Peter was a great coach. I never saw him in a leadership position. I only ever saw him as a coach. And I think he cared, and he had the knowledge and expertise to get us to be better than we had.
Yeah. It makes me think about Steve Jobs talking about Bill Campbell, who was written about in the book $1 Trillion Coach, where he makes the comment, Bill can turn B players into A players. Now, that's not to allege that the people on your team were B players. It's just fascinating that it made me think about that.
I think we started in Hampshire too. There's not a lot of A players in Hampshire too. Yeah. But it was great. It was fab. We started. We didn't have a clubhouse. We were getting changed in the back of the car, and then the council saw that we'd been successful. They gave us a second pitch. We had a second team. They built us a clubhouse. The town got a rugby club. It was great.
That's fabulous. So I'm going to go back to the question. Love the story. What separates a competent coach from a great coach?
So I think the rest of my playing career from school onwards, I'd had competent coaches, right? I had coaches who thought they were rugby coaches. I think that they thought they had all the tools.
Yeah.
But actually, there's a big difference to running around in the rain and running around the rain purposefully. And what Peter did is he could clearly see what journey we were on rather than just getting us to run around in the rain. And I think often clients, or another example, which doesn't have me talking about me thinking I'm a great coach. When I interview somebody, I'm often sitting opposite somebody and I'm thinking, I'm going to hire you. Like I'd give up a kidney to get you on my team. You are humble. You have no idea how good you are. And I can see where you're going to be in 3 or 4 years' time if the stars align and you apply yourself, and you have no idea. And I think great coaches can see where people's future in a way that they can't see it themselves. And I think, the Olympics is on at the minute. I bumped into Shannon in Italy skiing a couple of weeks ago because her daughter's taking part in the luge for Canada. You start there. And I'm sure when Shannon's daughter went down the luge, the coach is like going, ooh, right. Do you know what I mean? Like if you do it and you go down, you go, this is me. I'm going down this bobsleigh thing. That was okay. And the coach is going, I can see you are not afraid of death. I think to myself,
the luge is terrifying.
It's like, that is not a sport for me. Right. But it's just, you see something in the other people and you go, you are worth my effort. Whereas the competent coaches turn up, get paid. It's a job. And the ones, I think the great coaches go, Bill Campbell, back to your Bill, he wasn't getting paid to coach the lads at Google. He was just turning up for the good of his health, right? Do you know what I mean? It's like, but you wouldn't do it because you wouldn't do it if you didn't look. My financial advisor keeps telling me why, he keeps saying, I don't know why you're not retired. Mate, because I fucking love this. This is the best job I've ever had. I'm having more fun now than I've ever had in my life. What would I want to give up this? What would I do? Play golf? Jesus Christ, save me. So, I
heard a saying this week, and it was words to the effect, I have a brain. They weren't talking about me. It was contextual. I have a brain that likes to solve problems. So I must apply that. And that's why I have my business, my work being the thing that I do. Because if I was playing golf, I'd go mad.
Yeah. Well, do you know what? It's funny you mentioned that, right? So, have I got it behind me? I've got Gallup strengths behind me on one of those things on the bookcase. And so one of my top 5 Gallup strengths is input. So that is,
Yep.
I love to synthesize data and share it with people.
Yep.
The coaching job I have now is the first time that that's ever been really useful. So, I know that the last time for which data was available, 177 people died crossing a road in the UK at a zebra crossing, right? Like, not useful at all, right? Unless that comes up as a pub quiz question. But now, you look at something like AI or, I don't know, just like changes or, I'll work with a client and there'll be a problem that they have got that I can see that they don't know how to fix. I'll go away and do, I'll read 2 books a week. I'll watch a load of YouTube. I listen to podcasts. I'll go and come up with a body of work, synthesize it down. Maybe we'll build a tool and I'll apply it that they're never going to do because they're just too busy or they're not interested or it's not them. And so I think that, that's how my brain is wired. This is the best job I've ever had. I couldn't do anything else. Like, I mean, if I wasn't coaching, I don't know, I'd probably have to start another company again, not to go mad.
So through Pier 1 and Rackspace, excuse my ignorance if I've eliminated some others there, what are across that leadership journey, what did you learn that you've carried with you into coaching?
So they're really interesting sort of comparisons for me. So Rackspace, I was on the leadership team, but dislocated because I was in the UK. I built the UK and I was the head of that business in the UK. That I was the bottleneck on that business. Rackspace leadership culture wasn't one of radical candor. And then I think about how that was different at Pier 1. I had no direct reports in the UK except my PA. Deliberately built it like that. So every win in the UK was a win for the teams, the functional teams in the US, because otherwise you get into a resource clash. The team, Gary Sherlock was promoted from sort of CFO to co-CEO. And he said, look, I was the CFO. Like, you, as a CFO, you tend to manage quite a small team of experts. And now I'm running this company. He brought in a couple of leadership coaches so that was the first time at that level I'd had a leadership coach or executive team coach. And we would go and rent a house or two and we would live with each other for 3 days a quarter. And we wouldn't work in the business. We'd work on our relationships. So the first time that happened, I was somewhat taken aback. Like, I'm from the UK, stiff upper lip, we didn't get to have a third of the globe wasn't pink by singing Kumbaya and hugging each other. It was mainly just turning up and murdering natives. And he said to me, Dom, you haven't said anything. It's lunchtime. And I'm like, Gary, this is all so fucking weird. Bear with me whilst I get my head around it. And that team went on to be amazingly successful. And that's the best team I've ever been on. So in some regards, not as successful if you look at the metrics than Rackspace was at the time, but certainly a better team. We turned that business around and we had fun doing it with great people who I still have as friends today.
And so what do you think you've carried through with all of those lessons? Or is it's just, well, everyone who gets to this age goes through stuff and gets there? Or is there anything that you can single out that comes to mind?
I think you've got to have. So one of the things which is a real challenge is, as part of bringing that team together, you might call it storming, forming, norming. We said, you know what, we're going to agree as a leadership team at Pier 1 that we're not going to say anything negative or have a negative conversation about anybody when they're not in the room. So we called that our no triangulation rule.
I love that.
And some people couldn't do it. Some people had spent so much time in corporate life, elbows out, or it was just ingrained in them, or that's just who they were, that some people left. I think your team, a bit like sports teams, you don't necessarily need rock stars in every position, but you've got to be a team. And then you've got to play to your strengths and minimize your weaknesses. And that means you're going to have some tough conversations with people. I remember we'd hired a head of channel, new global head of channel from Dell. And he turned up in the UK and he started talking to me about Alistair, who was the UK head of sales at the time. And I said, mate, you've got 72 hours to tell him that, because I'm going to tell him what you've told me, because this is a conversation you have to have with him. So he came to me on Thursday as he was going home. He said, I can't work here. I can't work like this. He said, you told him what I told you. I said, I did, because that's how we behave. And I told you, not only did I tell him, but I told you I was going to tell him. And so he went back to Texas and quit, because he said this was ridiculous. And it's like, there's no point in having a rule like that if you then don't do it. And it's hard and you trip up, and we got it wrong. We didn't tell, as an executive team, we didn't tell the rest of the organization that we were behaving differently for 6 months. We kept that a secret so that we could fail in private, if you like. But then once we felt comfortable with it and a couple of people had left and we'd replaced them, we then rolled that out through the whole organization. And so that's one which I think is that.
Because that was the
no, sure.
Rackspace story was core values, and just I guess, best in class example of how to utilize core values. One of the best examples I've probably ever seen, to be honest.
Yeah. So and I had a big hand in writing them because I'd done them in the UK and then we retrofitted them to the rest of the organization. And I think the values fit absolutely into fanatical support. So, the company had already come up with that strapline fanatical support. And then those behaviors, we then started to use those behaviors too. So, bad news first, no surprises, right? Fantastic. We wanted to be the best IT service company in the world. And before we did our work with Ritz-Carlton, because Ritz-Carlton won the Malcolm Baldrige Award for quality. And so we went and tapped into Ritz-Carlton's skills. Before then, we had a BHAG of, we want to be the world's number one managed IT service provider, really dull. And then we said, we want to be the Ritz-Carlton of IT services.
Perfect.
And our strapline was fanatical support. And then our values were bad news first, no surprises. God, I can't remember them all off the top of my head. Treat fellow rackers like friends and family, a passion for your work. Interestingly, I think passion for your work was the weakest one because I don't think we fired or hired or promoted anyone who was or wasn't. Do you know what I mean? So, but the whole thing hung together. And, I used to say at the time we were process light and culture heavy. And we hired A players, often from a hospitality background. And we put them in a team of people who had this common desire to solve customer problems. And then we kept changing the structure so that became easier and easier and easier, which is one of the things we nicked from Ritz-Carlton's. In Ritz-Carlton, ladies and gentlemen serving ladies and gentlemen, and everyone's got $2,000 that they can spend to fix a customer problem. But they measure who spends the money. Because if you don't spend the money, then you weren't trying to find a problem and you didn't find a problem, so you didn't fix it. So we gave our account managers the equivalent of that, which is we said, you can give a customer up to 2 months fees as a goodwill gesture. You don't have to talk to your boss. We're just going to have a weekly cut the crap meeting, which is who gave credits, what did they give a credit for, how could we fix something at the back end so we didn't have to give a credit in the future. And the finance people had a cardiac arrest when we said we were just going to let the account managers give money away without management approval. But you know what? We gave away less money. If you're on the front line and you have this opportunity to fix it, you feel like you're being trusted. Instead of saying, oh, that's terrible, Brad, maybe you should file a complaint, or let me go and take that to my boss and then I never come back to you, or I do come back. It's just a mess. So let's just fix it. And what we found was if we said, oh, I'm really sorry, again, in most corporates, you get this sort of anti-liability thing. You get coached to never say sorry because you're admitting liability. We just went, bollocks, just say sorry and ask them what we'd have to do to make it right. And if what they ask for is less than the amount of money that you have, just give it to them. And if it isn't, just ask them, if you can't do that, what would be the next thing I could do? And then do that. Right. And if they don't want anything, send them pizza or send them T-shirts or send them fruit or send them biscuits or just send them something. And what we found was whenever we rang a customer and said, oh, by the way, you've had a failure, they said, what are you doing ringing me telling me I've had a failure? Like every other IT business, I have to ring them. Like I'm paying them for a service, but I have to monitor to see if they're delivering me the service. And every time we spoke to somebody and said, hey, we're sorry, and gave them a credit, they spent more money with us.
Who would have thought?
And you could see it in the data.
Yeah.
So it's just,
love it. This episode is brought to you by Evolution Partners, where we help leaders to confidently build enduring great companies using our proven, structured, strategic planning process that ensures you build and execute the right plan to build the business that you want and the life that you want. Check us out at evolutionpartners.com.au. And you can also check out our books, Made to Thrive, which is about the 5 roles of a CEO, becoming a great CEO rather than just a good CEO in your business. Second is Onboarded, which is about hiring and onboarding great people, making sure that you give yourself the greatest chance for people to succeed in your organization. And then third is Bigger Isn't Better, Better is Better, which is about building a business that is better rather than bigger. It's not about building a little business. It's about building a business that compounds, a business that you can actually fall in love with. Again, across the work that you do, as it should be, you're a huge fan of A teams or A player teams. I mean, it emulates, for example, Jim Collins, get the right people on the bus, doing the right thing the right way. And so understandably, when so many people are talking about this concept of building A teams, people can struggle. When they struggle, where do you think that leaders, founders, CEOs misdiagnose the reason for that struggle?
The B players not being A players, or the whole team being shit?
I don't have an A team. I don't have a team full of A players. It could be interpreted through both of those lenses that you just mentioned. How are they misdiagnosing the fact that they don't have a team full of A players when they're trying to solve it themselves?
Okay, I think if you've never been on an A team, like that, it really is an A team, then it's hard, right? Because you're in the wrong place. So McKinsey did a fantastic study looking at drug development teams, and it mirrors the work Jim Harter from Gallup, who I spoke to. Like Gallup say if you take only about a third of companies have scorecards. So that is at 5 o'clock on a Monday, Brad looks at his scorecard and he says, "I've won today," right? Only a third of companies have that in place. The other 2/3, Brad gets to 5 o'clock and he's been busy, but he doesn't know actually what the score is, and he doesn't know whether he's done anything useful or meaningful. So he just goes home. It's like feels like being in the mine, just digging, but you don't know whether you're digging coal. It's hot and sweaty and dark and miserable, and all you're doing is digging. But nobody ever says you did a good job or you didn't do a good job, or that was coal or it was just a pile of shit. And so when Gallup do the work, what they find is C and D players all think they're above average.
Yeah.
And so you go, okay, well, that's okay for individuals, because if you got up and thought, I go to work nobody goes to work to do a poor job, I think.
Yeah.
But, you don't know if you're doing a poor job or not because nobody tells you. So you just assume you're doing a good enough job, because otherwise you'd hate yourself. And who wants to do that? So
I think this is what the boss wants.
Yeah, the human brain tricks ourselves into saying we're doing okay. I know, frankly, we look around and everybody else is doing more or less what we do.
Yeah.
McKinsey looked at teams, and the top team in drug development. So, you get a molecule, you patent it, you have 8 years before your patent runs out. So you've got to get it through the clinical trials and to market and everything and make your money back before your patent runs out. And the top teams got their drugs to market 500 days quicker than average. The next sort of 2 to 5% got their drugs to market significantly quicker than average, but 85% of the teams thought they were above average. Right?
I mean, that's great. Go on. Close your story, please.
And so I look at that and go, unless you're in one of those top 5%, right, you're probably not doing something deliberate. 85% of people think they're above average, which means that from their perspective, they're patting themselves on the back and going, you know what, we're pretty good. Even quite far down the stacking order, they think they're pretty good. So I hate averages. When anyone talks about averages, it drives me demented. Only 1% of companies grow, as in their growth is more than 0, 5 years on the trot. So I work with growth companies who want to be exceptional. So I'm only working with founders and CEOs who have an inkling that they want to be in the top 1%. And they'll put up with not being in the top 1% because they're trying to get into the top 1%. But I won't work with average CEOs who just want to be mediocre, because I can't bear it. I find myself getting more stressed about their lack of care and competence than they do, and we fall out.
I find that it's what's unique about what we do, that we get to sit on A teams, and you don't, to your point, you don't know what you don't know. So if you've never been on an A team, you don't actually know what it's like. And if you don't know what it's like, you don't know what it feels like. And it is just awesome. So many clients ask me about what other clients are doing. And sometimes the hard truth is, well, they're not tolerating mediocrity.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's
a
good point.
It. And do you know what? I reckon, well, I read Jim Collins' book, The B 2.0, when it came out.
Beyond Entrepreneurship.
And I reread, a little while before that, I'd reread Good to Great. And what I came away with was thinking, I've always talked about how you have to have good people, but I wasn't obsessed about it. And now I'm obsessed about it, because if you don't, I don't. So the analogy I give with clients is I say, look, you've told me what you want, and this is what I see. From a distance, these things look broadly similar, but when I get up close, donkeys and racehorses are not the same thing, right? And you've told me you want to run the Grand National, or the Melbourne Cup. You want to run the Melbourne Cup, and what I see is you've just got donkeys, and it doesn't matter who we put in the saddle and what nutrition we give them. No donkey is going to win the Melbourne Cup, right? It's just not a thing, and so you just have to have good enough, right? On its day, the right horse with the right jockey will win the cup. Like, well, in the UK, we have the Grand National, right? So it's a real leveler.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I say, look, it's okay if you have donkeys, because, you can go to Blackpool and you can have a children's beach ride, and that's okay. If that's the business you want to run, then that's fine. But you're not even running the best fucking donkey ride. You're just like sleepwalking into running a donkey ride, saying you want to win the national. Like, you just let's get clear. Where is the biggest constraint on your business, and have we got good enough people running it? Because we might have okay people in finance, might be fine, but we might need world-class people in sales, or we might need world-class people in delivery, or it might be that finance is our thing and we need to have world-class people in finance. But that the makeup of the team, do you need a world-class goalkeeper, world-class striker, or maybe it's like, what can I get, and how can I build a team around the stars that I have got? So
time has to be considered as well. Why do you think that people resist that? Why do you think that
I spend most of my life telling people to shoot their dog, and it's really depressing. It's depressing for me and for them, because they say, but he's been with me for 10 years, but I know his family. I'm his godfather. I'm the godfather of his 2 children. It's like, so what I say is, look, Brad, you're in Division 3 in the UK, the Premier League. 3 teams get promoted, 3 teams get relegated. It's a ladder. You're in Division 3. You've told me you want to be in the Premier League. Honestly, just think about the football teams that you've seen who've got promoted from Division 3 to the Premier League. How many of them had the same players on the field when they got there? Some of them might get there. The young lads might get there. But our goalkeeper, like, he's 35. He's probably not going to be on the pitch. Like, you can give him a job cleaning the changing rooms. You can put him in charge of the academy. He's just not going to be in goal anymore.
Yeah.
I think that's the hardest. I think that's one of the hardest. Like, if you're a startup and you get gazillions of dollars and you're going like that, then, and you're doing this, I was going to say, historically in SaaS, you do triple, double, you'd go 1 million, 3, 9, 18, 36, right? But if you bootstrapped a business, and, often the businesses I'm working with are 10 to 20 years old, sort of 15, 30 million pound businesses, they've worked together for a long time often.
Yeah.
And when the CEO goes, shit, I'm in my 50s and I need to sell this thing because this is my pension. And then I turn up and I say, your head of marketing, she knows nothing about marketing. And we might actually need to spend some ad dollars, and it's not her. Or your head of sales couldn't sell his way out of a wet paper bag. And you've got 8 salespeople, none of whom have hit target in 5 years. It's like, they're like, oh, I want this, but I have this. And it's like, it's all just emotion. It's not fact. We don't disagree on any of the facts. It's just
in my experience in an owner-led company, one of the keys to success is charisma. You've got to be charismatic enough that you can get this group of people together to subscribe to your vision, to stick around. Now, a part of that charisma is loyalty, and that loyalty serves you well, but it can also serve you in a negative manner. It can also come back at you in this kind of form where you keep people for way too long.
I would say in the clients that I've worked with where they do 12 months and not carry on, this is the number one challenge, is that they get partway through the first year and they realize that they don't want to make the changes that they need to make. And so they change their plan and they decide that they're going to be mediocre instead.
But
and that maybe instead of selling it and getting 10 million, they'd be happy with 5 or 4 or 3 or 2.
And that just breaks your heart.
Well, it's just a shame because you can I can see, back to the early part, I can see their potential. And having done this for 10 years, I know the team. I just had Jerry Toombs on the show a couple of weeks ago, and he exited for, I think, 70 odd million. Got a fantastic exit. The team were good enough to get him the exit, but you didn't have to go out to market and hire Ronaldo and Messi. That wasn't what we had to do. You just had to turn up and go, what's the plan? How do we, it's a bit like Peter coaching us at Lymington, 30 over 35, not very talented lads in the park. Let's have a plan. Let's execute the plan. The fundamentals take you so far. And most of the companies you're competing against just have no plan, and their fundamentals are just rubbish. Most companies are C and D, thinking they're above average, so therefore they don't try. You turn up and you get some B players well drilled, and we're away.
Let me change gears for a moment. As a seasoned coach who I have the greatest respect for, how do you think that coaching has changed in the last 10 or 15 years?
Hard to answer for me, because 10 years ago I was rubbish at it. I mean, I only did it by accident as well, because I honestly thought when I started doing this that once the kids went to school, I would get a proper job again. Because for me at that point, coaching felt bit sort of life coachy. It didn't feel like a real job. It felt like I thought I was investing in me and building skill by coaching others. I was fine. I was becoming a future
Yeah.
better leader. And so I don't know what it was like 10 years ago, but there are certainly now way more coaches than there were. You just look on LinkedIn or Instagram and, there are hundreds and hundreds, and people write a book and then they build a program around it and, start certifying other coaches. And there's tens of those organizations as well. It's weird because I think I'm sure they all have good intentions, but it's like, we don't need any more frameworks, surely. Or enough frameworks. And most of those coaches haven't never been on an A team or delivered an amazing result. And so they're a bit like all the rugby coaches I had all through my career until I met Peter. They think they're doing a good job, and they are, I suppose. They're probably better than nothing.
How does a founder, owner know how to find a good coach? No, a great coach.
I think if I think about all of the great people I've hired as employees,
yeah,
they all made me slightly uncomfortable. They would have an insight that I knew to be true, but didn't really want to think about too hard because it meant I had to change something fundamental or difficult. Whether they would be salespeople or finance people or HR people or whatever, all the best people I've had on my teams have all been insightful. And so I think coaches is the same. You work with a coach and they have some, I suppose it's a bit like Kim Scott's book, Radical Candor, right? And it's that I care deeply about you and therefore I'm going to be, that my feedback is going to be very direct.
Yeah.
And so I think they will make you feel uncomfortable.
Yeah. Yeah. How do you know when to get out of the frameworks? The frameworks are there. You spoke about frameworks before. Well, I think that part of the judgment is knowing when to use the framework and when to drift. And you got a room full of A-type personalities who want to peck each other to death. And so how do you know when it's time to step out and trust your judgment? Any thoughts on that?
Do you know, it's funny. We do an NPS, Net Promoter Score feedback form at the end of every session with every client.
Yeah.
And I often get marked down by the engineers in the room because I didn't follow the agenda. And so I have an agenda, it goes on the wall. And, I've worked with a number of coaching partners in the past. And quite often they'll come out of a room, we'll do a day with the client. Client will say 10 out of 10. And they'll say, you went off the agenda at about 10:30. And I had no idea what you were going to do for the rest of the day. And you just made it up on the fly for 6 hours, and got them where they needed to get to. And so that's what, when I started, I would have a fixed agenda and I'd take people through the tools. And I have a vague agenda, or I have an agenda, but often something crops up, right? And so I try to give clients set the expectation. So I have a tool called Brutal Truths, which I nicked from Jim Collins. And so we start at the beginning of the day. Either we do Brutal Truths or Stinky Fish. But it's like, what is it that people are thinking and not saying? I feel as though they have to unpack all of their baggage and get it out on the wall, because otherwise they're sitting there for 2 days going, are we going to get to the thing that I think is the most important thing? If we get the most important thing on the wall and we agree that these are the things we're going to do, then people can get into it. Now, I do that exercise. That's probably get into there at 9:30 on day one. There have been some days where we're still working through that at 5 o'clock, right? And everything else that was on the agenda is just not as important as this, because this turned up to be the most important thing. Or I've got a 3-year agenda which says this is what we're going to do every day, or every time we meet, this is what we're going to do for 3 years. And I'll have I had a client call at the weekend because, that's when he's free. So he always pings me on a Sunday and goes, have you got 10 minutes? And if I'm doing nothing in particular, I'll say yes. Otherwise, I'll say no. But we were chatting about they're down on the farm in a couple of weeks and he's just got this thing he needs to fix. And so I said, right, well, what about we do this, 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 and this? We change the agenda and we'll get stuck into it. That's going to be messy, right? And so the things, when it gets messy, then the timeline can go out the window. And you know what? They're the bits I like the most, right? So because you're then out on the high wire without a safety net, right? I had a client who I did a round of one-to-ones before she came to the farm with her team, and I rang her up the night before and I said, this is the most dysfunctional group of people I've ever had in a room in my life. The COO said she fucking hates the head of people and she's not going to talk to him. I said, I don't know what to do. And she said, well, I'll be all right, won't it? Be all right. and it was all right. But it was so sometimes it's terrifying because you have no idea where it's going to go, and I love those days. Except when I don't, in which case I go, why did that not work? But that happens infrequently.
That's the book that needs to be written. Stories like that from people like you and me and others, where we've been in the craziest possible situation. As we move to wrap it up, Dom, what's a book that you would recommend for our audience that isn't my book or your book?
Oh, so many good books.
Imagine if I was a good podcast host, I would have given you that question before.
Yeah, no, I like that. I've got a few books here, all of which are sort of practitioner manuals, if you like.
Yeah.
It's quite a tome, but, It's a Manager by Jim Hartner at Gallup's fab. The guys at Insight Partners, largest PVC firm in the world, they wrote this What a Unicorn Knows, which I thought was fab. And in a slightly different vein, I've got Beyond Performance 2 by Scott Keller, who's a McKinsey partner on the West Coast. Don't hold that against him. I rang him and he was in a wife beater in front of his Marshall amp with a fridge full of beer, and he was talking to me before he went surfing. And then when I see him on the McKinsey website, he's always in a suit. So it's just I've seen him on his downtime. But he's written a series of books about the challenge of being a CEO, and I think they're all there. I go back to those all the time because they're sort of the people, the scaling firm, and how to run a business. I think they're three things that people get stuck on.
Great. We'll put those in the show notes. How can people learn more about you, your business, and I'm going to make you say your books and your podcast?
So the books are Fuck Plan B and Mind Your Fucking Business. The podcast is called Scale to Win. There's also a YouTube channel, which is Dominic Monkhouse. If you hit up LinkedIn, which is, luckily I have a name, Dominic Monkhouse, there's only one of me in the world. So, I'm not like John Smith. So you just search for that on Google, you'll get all of that. I do a newsletter that goes out every week. We do a podcast and a YouTube episode alternate weeks. So, and if anyone wants any help, let me know. See if I'd be a fit.
Dom, you're a true legend, and I have the utmost time for you. What haven't we discussed that you wanted to cover off today, if anything?
I do think if anyone's listening to this, they should just think to themselves about their team of direct reports, because this has been a theme of our conversation. And they should just think, knowing what I know about them now, would I hire them again tomorrow? And if they quit, would I fight to keep them? And if you can't say yes and yes, then they shouldn't be on your team.
What a beautiful way to end, Dom. Again, you are a true legend. And yeah, I feel somewhat honored to have you in my circle of influence. So thank you for your time today. It's been great to chat.
Brad, likewise, fantastic. Mate, your books are brilliant. Onboarding in particular, I give that to clients all the time. Great to be on the show. All the best.
Thank you. Well, I hope you enjoyed the episode as much as I did. If you'd be kind enough to leave a review for the podcast, that'd be really helpful to other like-minded entrepreneurs, and then we can grow our community. If you want to find out more about our guests, head over to evolutionpartners.com.au/podcast, where you can find show notes and other additional reading. Hope to see you back next week. Until then, keep thriving.